The brass key was still warm from the stranger's palm when he whispered those 7 words, and in that freezing hallway, my entire reality didn't just crack, it shattered. Your father has been lying to you. He didn't wait for a reaction, didn't offer a shoulder to cry on, and didn't look back as he vanished into the shadows of the funeral home, leaving me clutching a secret that felt heavier than the casket in the next room. My name is Morgan Pcel. I'm 31 years old, and 3 weeks ago I buried my mother, but that was only the beginning of the funeral. The real burial happened when I realized the man I called Dad was a ghost story architect who had been haunting our lives for 3 decades. Have you ever looked into the eyes of a parent and realized you were looking at a master of disguise? The collapse happened on a Tuesday, exactly at 2:07 p.m. I was at the hospital, ironically enough, charting vitals at the nurse's station when the vibration of my phone nearly shook it off the desk. My father's name flashed across the screen, Gerald. His voice was a flat line, devoid of the jagged edges of panic you'd expect from a man whose wife's heart had just failed. Morgan, your mother collapsed. They're taking her to County General. My heart did a slow, sickening roll in my chest. I drove like a woman possessed, hands white-knuckled on the wheel, ignoring the red light on Elm as if the laws of physics didn't apply to a daughter trying to outrun death. But when I sprinted into the ER, I didn't find a miracle. I found Patty, a nurse I'd worked with on the 3rd floor, and the look she gave me was the one we save for the families who have already lost. My mother was gone before the ambulance had even cleared the driveway. A massive stroke, they said. Fast, painless. They offer those words like bandages, hoping to cover the gaping wound of a sudden exit, but they never quite stick. What stuck, however, was the sight of my father. He wasn't slumped in a plastic chair. He wasn't weeping. He was at the admitting desk, his pen moving with the rhythmic, steady grace of a man balancing a checkbook. He was signing paperwork, casket displays, visitation windows, floral arrangements. He had already chosen white lilies. My mother loathed white lilies. She said they smelled like the end of the world. She loved yellow daisies, vibrant and stubborn. But as I stood there, watching him finalize the details of her disappearance, my throat felt like it was filled with dry sand. "Dad, when did you get here?" I managed to ask. He didn't look up from the brochure. "About an hour ago. I handled everything, Morgan. You don't need to worry about a thing." An hour. He had been there for 60 minutes before he picked up the phone to tell me my mother was dying. Why does a man wait until the heart stops to call the only child? That night, I sought refuge in her bedroom, hoping to catch a lingering scent of her perfume, but the air was sterile. Her reading glasses were still perched on the nightstand, and her library book was face down, marking a page she would never finish. But when I reached for the bedside drawer, the one she kept locked with a fierce, quiet devotion, it slid open with a hollow click. It was empty. The brass key she wore on a chain around her neck was gone. My mother hadn't been dead for a full day, and her secrets had already been evicted. Wednesday morning brought a new kind of haunting. I drove to the house, the key the stranger gave me burning a hole in my pocket, only to hear soft jazz drifting from the kitchen. My mother hated jazz. She said it sounded like an argument nobody was winning. I walked in to find a woman I'd never seen before standing at the stove. She was pouring coffee into my mother's favorite blue mug, and she was wearing my mother's camel cashmere cardigan, the one Mom had meticulously repaired with hidden stitches. "Morgan, this is Denise," my father said, stepping out of the hallway as if this were a normal brunch. "She's a close friend. She's been helping me through this." Denise Harmon smiled at me with a practiced saccharine pity. "I'm so sorry for your loss, sweetheart." I had never heard her name. Not in 30 years. Not once. When I asked about Mom's home office, my father waved a dismissive hand, a gesture he used to brush away silly female concerns. "I cleaned all that clutter up. Your mother kept so much junk in those files." The filing cabinet was a void, the desk was a desert. Even the corkboard where she pinned her life in receipts and reminders had been stripped bare. When I asked to read the eulogy, he shook his head with a patronizing sigh. "I think it's better if I do it. You'll get too emotional." Denise reached out then, touching my arm with a hand that sported a thin silver bracelet, the one I'd saved 3 months of babysitting money to buy for Mom's 16th birthday. "Your dad knows best, sweetie," she whispered. "Have you ever felt a scream dying in your throat because you knew if you let it out, they'd call you the unstable one?" I didn't scream. I watched. I watched the way Denise turned her wrist so the light caught the engraving of Margaret. I watched the way my father leaned into her, as if he were the one who needed bracing. If this story is starting to feel like a mirror to something you've lived through, please take a moment to like and subscribe. It helps these stories reach the people who are still trapped in the silence. And I'd love to know where you're joining me from. Drop your local time in the comments. I'm reading every single one. But let's go back to that cold Thursday evening, to the visitation at Morrison & Sons, where the air was thick with the suffocating scent of white lilies and the sound of my father's lies. He stood by the casket like a seasoned politician, his eyes perfectly red-rimmed, his handshake firm yet grieving. Every woman who approached was met with a lingering touch and a rehearsed tragedy. I stood 3 feet away, an ornament in my own mother's mourning. I heard him lean toward Ed Brennan, an old neighbor, his voice dropping to that confidential register. Margaret had been struggling mentally, Ed. The last few years were hard on all of us. She made some unusual financial decisions toward the end. I tried to help, but she wouldn't listen. My skin went ice cold. He was rewriting her legacy 10 feet from her body, painting her as a confused, fragile woman to cover his own tracks. My Uncle Ray put a heavy hand on my shoulder. Your dad's been carrying this family on his back, Morgan. Be strong for him. I nodded, because if I spoke, I'd vomit. The parking lot was a relief of October chill when I finally escaped the floral-scented theater. That's when I saw him, the man from the hallway. He was leaning against the brick wall, silver hair catching the streetlights, looking like a retired professor waiting for a train that was decades late. Miss Purcell, he said. I'm Harold Briggs. I was your mother's attorney. We need 5 minutes. I scoffed. My mother didn't have an attorney. My father handled every contract, every bank account, every breath we took. Your father has been lying to you your entire life, Harold said, his voice as steady as a heartbeat. There is a second will, one he doesn't want found. If he discovers you have this, you are in danger. He pressed the brass key into my hand again, the storage unit key. He showed me a photograph of my mother, smiling, signing a document in his office. I made a promise to Margaret. He whispered. Check the unit tonight. Your father filed his version of the will this morning. At 9:05 p.m., I was standing in front of a roll-up door at a storage facility behind a Dairy Queen. My hands were shaking so violently I nearly dropped the key into the gravel. When the door rattled up, I didn't find clutter. I found 3 meticulously labeled boxes. Box 1, 12 leather-bound journals. Box 2, a mountain of bank statements and insurance policies. Box 3, a single envelope addressed to me. Open first. I sat on the concrete floor and tore the seal. My dearest girl, the letter began. If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it. Your father is not who you think he is. The letter was a map of a 30-year betrayal. My mother detailed how Gerald had seized control of her inheritance, $180,000. Within 3 years of marriage, how he had moved it into private accounts I never knew existed, how he had changed the beneficiary on her life insurance policy from me to himself by forging her signature. He told me if I ever said a word, he would make sure you believed I was crazy, she wrote. I was too afraid to leave, but I was not too afraid to prepare. At the bottom was a line that felt like a command. He took my money. He took my voice. Don't let him take yours. Is it possible to mourn a person who is still breathing, while realizing the person you buried was a secret hero? I didn't sleep. I spent the night in a sea of bank statements tracing the leaks. $3,000 in July, $8,000 in December, always just enough to stay under the radar, but over 15 years it totaled $340,000 of stolen life. Then I found the will. The real will. It was dated 6 months after the one my father had filed. It was notarized, witnessed, and ironclad. The house went to me. The savings went to me. A secret $200,000 life insurance policy went to me. Under state law, the later dated will was the only one that mattered. I called Harold at 11:00 p.m. What do I do? I asked. We file tomorrow, he said, and we bring the hammer. But I had to survive Wednesday first. I had to go to that house and play the good daughter for a man who had siphoned my mother's soul. I sat at the kitchen table while he made eggs, acting as if I hadn't spent the night reading about his crimes. I met with the attorney, Morgan. Everything is straightforward. I'll take care of the finances for you, he said, his back turned. Denise walked in then, wearing my mother's garnet ring. Jerry said I should hold on to some of Margaret's things for safekeeping, she chirped. I smiled. I nodded. I ate the eggs. I was performing the role of a lifetime, but inside, I was a coiled spring. If you've ever had to smile at a snake while holding the shovel behind your back, you know exactly how that breakfast tasted. Thursday morning, 10 a.m., conference room B at the funeral home. My father had invited 30 people, a public performance of his responsible stewardship. Neighbors, aunts, golfing buddies, all there to witness him take care of his fragile daughter. Terrence Holt, my father's high-priced attorney, stood at the podium and read the forged will. The terms were a slap in the face. Gerald got everything. I got a $25,000 trust to be administered by Morgan Pcel, an allowance, a leash. My father stood up, his voice cracking with artificial grief. Margaret wanted me to make sure Morgan is taken care of. I'll manage things, as I always have. He squeezed my shoulder. Morgan's like her mother, he whispered to the room. Wonderful heart, but not great with numbers. The room chuckled. I felt the heat rise in my neck. Grief is a shadow, but a lie is a cage. I let the silence hang for 3 beats. Then I stood up. Can I say something? I asked. My father smiled, thinking I was about to play my part. Of course, sweetheart. I looked at the 30 witnesses. I just want to understand, I said, my voice level and cold. Mom worked for 28 years. She inherited money. She paid into insurance for decades. And you're telling me I get an allowance? The room shifted. My father's smile faltered. Morgan, this isn't the time. You're being emotional. Uncle Ray chimed in from the front row. Your daddy knows what's best, girl. I think the room should meet Harold Briggs, I said. The door opened. Harold stepped in, his tweed coat a stark contrast to the sleek suits in the room. My father's face didn't just turn pale, it turned the color of ash. He recognized the name. He recognized the loose end. Harold didn't waste time. He presented the real will, the one filed 24 hours prior. He read the terms, the house, the savings, the $200,000 policy, all mine. Gerald got nothing. That's a forgery, my father roared, leaping to his feet. My wife was confused. She didn't know what she was signing. Then came the hammer. Linda Marsh, my mother's best friend, stood up. I was a witness, she said, her voice like iron. I watched her sign it. She was clear-headed, she was determined, and she was terrified of you, Jerry. Harold then played the recording of Vivian Cole, the forensic accountant. Her voice filled the room, cold and clinical, detailing the $340,000 in structured transfers and the forged signatures on the life insurance forms. This is textbook elder financial abuse, she stated. The silence in that room was so heavy you could hear the clock ticking on the wall. I stood up and read the letter. Just 3 sentences. He took my money. He took my voice. Don't let him take yours. I looked at my father, who was now shrinking in his navy suit. 30 people were watching him, not with sympathy, but with the dawning realization that they had been cheering for a villain. She was sick, he screamed, his voice hitting a desperate, jagged note. She was lying. But nobody moved to help him. Bob Hensley, his golfing partner of 20 years, stood up, grabbed his jacket, and walked out without a word. Denise pulled her hand away from his arm as if he were radioactive. The second will is already part of the probate record, Harold announced, and the forensic evidence has been forwarded to the district attorney. The word district attorney landed like a gunshot. People began to scatter, whispers turning into a low roar of scandal as they fled the room. My father was left standing in the center of 30 empty chairs. I raised you, he hissed at me, his eyes wet with a rage that wasn't grief. I fed you. I looked him dead in the eye and pulled my arm free from his grip. Don't touch me, I said. I walked out into the October sun, and for the first time in 31 years, I breathed air that didn't belong to him. The fallout was swift and surgical. Within 24 hours, Terrence Holt withdrew as my father's counsel. Given the nature of the allegations, I cannot maintain representation, he told Harold. My father's social life didn't just end, it evaporated. In a town this small, 30 witnesses are better than a front-page headline. He went to the Rotary Club that following Thursday, and though nobody was rude, nobody saved him a seat. When he sat down at a table, the conversation died until he left. Denise was gone by Wednesday. She didn't leave because of a moral epiphany. She left because the $340,000 was spent, and there was no more coming. She left the garnet ring on the kitchen table. I moved into the house on Maple Drive 3 weeks later. The first thing I did was buy 5 gallons of winter sky blue paint. My mother had wanted that color for 28 years. My father had insisted on beige because it was sensible. I painted every room myself, and as the blue covered the beige, I felt the house beginning to wake up. I planted the yellow daisies. I planted the lavender. I used the hidden $18,000 $529 fund to enroll in my master's program. The one my father told me I didn't need. The loudest truths are often written in the quietest ink. The district attorney's review is still open. Whether they prosecute or not, the record exists. My father is living in a basement apartment 2 states away, still sending me emails about how misunderstood he was and how mom had a flair for drama. I don't reply. I don't block him, either. I just let his words sit in the inbox, proof of a man who still can't admit he's been caught. I found one last thing in the house, a photo of me at 5 years old, sitting on my mother's lap. He had missed it when he was gutting her life. In it, she's looking at me with a look of such fierce protection that it makes my heart ache. She couldn't escape the cage, but she spent 25 years making sure the door would be wide open for me. I'm telling you this because there is power in the paper trail. If something feels wrong, if the math doesn't add up, if you're being told you're too emotional to understand your own life, trust yourself. Silence protects the predator. The truth protects the legacy. If you found a box of secrets that changed everything you knew about your family, could you ever truly forgive the person who built that house of lies? I've been thinking about that every time I drink from my mother's blue mug. Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you're ready for the next reveal, I've linked a story in the description about a woman who uncovered a secret at her own Thanksgiving dinner that makes this look like a warm-up. Hit like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.